My name is Chris Peterson. I'm from rural Clear Lake, Iowa. I'm a traditional independent pig farmer, been all my life, and I want to thank everyone for coming to this. We have another panel here, and it's called The World We Live In, International Trade Agreements, Farm Bill, Corporate Concentration, and What It Means to Our Rural Communities, Family Farms, and the Environment. So, the four participants are Dan Imhoff, author of Food Fight, Citizen's Guide to the Next Food and Farm Bill. Ben Lilliston, Director of Corporate Strategies for the Institute of Agriculture and Trade Policy. Patty Lavera, Assistant Director of Food and Water Watch. And John Peck, Executive Director of Family Farm Defenders. And I just want to say, I'm an associate of Socially Responsible Agricultural Project. I'm proud to be in the fight and stand up for what we all believe in.
I think I'm going to go first if that's an option. Hey everybody, I can get started. So I just have a couple slides of some charts and graphs and stuff that we think help kind of tell the story of what we are up against and how we got here. So while we work on getting those up, my name again is Patty Lavera. I work for Food and Water Watch. I work in DC, but we have folks all over the place. And I'm really happy to be here. There's some other folks from Food and Water Watch here. We're going to be in different sessions during the day. And we've learned a lot over the years by talking to most of the people in this room. I think it's like a reunion here. And one thing that we learned when we first started thinking about this factory farm issue is it kind of gets put in a box as though it's an environmental fight, or it's a fight about a particular practice, for animal welfare, or it's a fight for a particular region. And what we learned when we got smarter from talking to folks all over the country, many of whom are here, about what this looks like on the ground, is that this is a system. Right? It's not an accident. It's not the result of some deficiency in the marketplace. This is a system that's been built over a long period of time. And when we're thinking about that system, we have to understand it. We have to understand who designed it and who's driving it. And we have to figure out who has the power that designed that system and is maintaining that system. I think that's what we're all here trying to kind of link together as we get ready to talk about this stuff all day. So the first... Well, we're close. That first picture, when it gets bigger, you're going to see is one way we've talked about how to think about this in a picture, if we're thinking about the system that brings us our food. And the picture that we landed on to kind of just to capture that idea is an hourglass. So at the top of the hourglass, there's a lot of folks producing food, still. Less than there used to be, but we still have a lot of folks on farms producing food. We have way more at the bottom of the hourglass, right, at the other end of the food chain, who are eating that food. We're buying it, eating it, being served it in a school or an institution or whatever. And things happen in between those two steps. Most of us don't go buy a live chicken or a bushel of corn or a bushel of wheat, right? Stuff happens between the farm and the table, and increasingly that stuff, those steps in the middle, are happening by fewer and fewer players, right? So the middle of that hourglass is getting skinnier over time. That means some interesting things logistically, right? It means some interesting things in terms of just market trends and what brands we have, but it also means a lot more than we're told as consumers, especially about power and decision making and who's deciding what happens in those middle steps. And when we're here today talking about how animal agriculture has changed, we think it's because of this skinny part of that hourglass getting skinnier. So we can pop to that next slide. I'm just going to do a couple examples. And so we just heard about North Carolina. I'm going to keep it with pigs, and we're going to talk just for a couple minutes about Iowa, which is another unfortunate pig powerhouse at this point that I think is going to come up a lot today. So this is just a couple of things in a row that is how we think about, with the research we've done and talking to all of you about what's going on that's changed this system and brought us a system that's reliant on factory farms. So this is a map that we've done. You can see it at factoryfarmmap.org. It's a pain in the butt to do this map. Right? It shouldn't be this hard. We're doing the government's job for them. We have to use data they do for a different purpose to try to figure out where we've concentrated factory farms. This is the view of the country just for hogs. So you can see that we've concentrated not just how we're raising animals, but where we're raising animals, and that comes with public health, environmental, and economic consequences for the places where we concentrate that production. So the Midwest, but then you see North Carolina, we have pockets of production for each type of animal, and that didn't used to be the case. So we can go to the next slide. So what does that mean? Why did that happen? So we're talking about the middle of that hourglass getting skinnier. If we're talking about animal production, somebody has to bring those animals to market, right? So with hogs and pigs, we're talking about meat packers, and we've seen the control that meat packers have over the marketplace get tighter. Lots of small ones went out of business, and the big ones got bigger. So this is from the early 80s into the couple years ago into the 2000s. How much of the marketplace? How many of a type of animal did one company slaughter? When you combine the top 4 companies, how much of the market did they control? The reason we use that, and John Eichert can back me up on this, I think, is that economists say when 4 companies control more than 40% of a market, that market's not going to look the way it's supposed to look when we learn economics in high school about supply and demand. It's too concentrated. We're way over that in most parts of the food supply, and we've been way over that in hogs since the mid-90s. So we can go to the next slide. So we have that time frame from the 80s to the 2000s. So what did that mean in Iowa? A place that's always raised a lot of hogs. It meant that from the mid-80s, the early 80s to the mid-2000s, the number of hogs that were sold in Iowa almost doubled, or did double, but the value of those hogs went down a little bit. So you're raising more of them, but they're worth less, right? So you're shifting to a commodity market. Those individual hogs are worth less, so people raise more of them. We can go to the next slide. So what did that mean economically? Did we all suddenly become awash in bacon? Did bacon get half as cheap? Did pork become a great deal? Not necessarily, because people weren't getting paid for those pigs, but also the marketplace changed because farmers couldn't survive that. So those yellow bars are the number of farms in Iowa that were raising hogs. So from the early 80s to the 2000s, that dropped from almost 50,000 to under 10,000. That's a huge drop in the number of places where hogs are being raised. But again, during that time, we didn't run out of pork. We didn't run out of hogs. The ones that stayed in the business or the new ones that came in were much, much bigger, which is that red line. In the early 80s, an average hog farm in Iowa had under 500 head. By the 2000s, the average hog farm in Iowa had 5,000, right? So people have read Michael Pollan or read food studies where people talk about get bigger, get out. This is what that looks like. There's fewer players, but those players are bigger. So one more slide. And that has impacts. That has lots of impacts that you all know about because you're living in these communities. One of those impacts is environmental. When you take a bunch of little farms that are raising a certain amount of hogs and replace them maybe with 1 or 2 operations that are raising the same number of hogs, we go from a place that can integrate that waste as a fertilizer to a place where the animal waste is a waste, which is what we're going to talk about a lot today. And when you concentrate it regionally, you have regions of the country that are dealing with an enormous burden. So we did some math, again, using numbers that the government does not want us putting together. We had to do a fairly ridiculous calculation to use a number from EPA and numbers from USDA that they didn't want put together to figure out what would this mean if we did what Rick was talking about this morning and translated this to the amount of waste we had from the city. The difference being that the waste from the city goes to a sewage treatment plant and the waste from a cave does not. So in individual counties in Iowa in 2007, using the numbers that USDA put together and EPA put together, we're talking about counties that have the waste coming from hogs that are equivalent to 3 times the amount of waste coming from the city of Atlanta. Or Atlanta plus Los Angeles, again, without sewage treatment. That is not always how we raise hogs. That is not always how farmers did this. That is a change, and that's a change that's happened because of policy decisions, economic decisions, mergers in this system that has been created by the players who are benefiting from this, who often aren't even folks who operate these facilities, it's the companies they sell to. So that's what we're all here to talk about. I think Ben from ITP is going to go next and talk about one facet of the policies that have created that system, which are trade policy. And we go to the next slide, you might use the picture. We'll talk about one trade policy that could change soon that's going to drive this trend further.
Great. Thanks very much, Maddie. My name is Ben Milliston. I work at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, just a few miles to the west of Minnesota. We were formed in the 1980s around the family farm crisis there, where people were trying to figure out what are some of the global forces that are driving the crisis at that time. And you don't have to go very far looking at global forces to reach trade agreements. And trade rules, trade agreements really set the rules of the playing field. They set the rules of the game. Many of the companies that Patty was referencing and that we heard earlier, these are global companies. They're not really U.S. companies. And so they're thinking about this form of production with a global view. And they have operations in multiple countries. And so what they're pushing for in trade agreements are how do we facilitate setting up in multiple countries, and how do we export to multiple countries? How do we lower regulations to a point where we can do that? How do we override local control and local opposition? Put food safety and health and environmental safety sort of as a back burner and really prioritize trade, and that's what these trade deals do. I just want to real quickly give a little bit of history to kind of point how we got here. 1994, 1995, 1996 are really key years that put in place this system. 94 was the passage of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is really the template for all future free trade deals, regional deals, and it's the template for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is right in front of us right now. 95 is the World Trade Organization comes into being. This is sort of the umbrella trade rules. 160 plus countries are part of that. And then 96 is the Freedom to Farm Bill, the Farm Bill in 96, which was designed to comply with those trade deals and basically put aside issues like fair prices for farmers and supply management and say, go all in on exports. And what that did, of course, was go all in on cheap feed. And then you see an expansion of, you already saw CAFO expansion taking place, and then it goes into turbo drive, sort of after those sort of three things go into being. So these trade deals tackle a couple things. One, just very basic tariffs. They lower tariffs, which allow companies to trade across borders much more easily. So in NAFTA, for example, you saw Mexico lower their tariffs, and a flood of U.S. corn goes into Mexico. 2 million Mexican farmers get pushed off the land. And many of them end up coming back across the border to work in the agriculture sector here in the United States. There's a reason why tariffs are in place, and they're often in place. People view them as a tax, and this is somehow making consumer prices higher, but it's also, they're also there to protect the market, whether it's for small businesses or whether it's farmers, protecting prices and making sure that you can still produce in your own country. Tariffs is a big issue in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And the other area is regulation. And this is a part of trade agreements that people often don't really grasp, and it's not part of the big public debate and trade that we hear. But a lot of these trade agreements are fundamentally about regulation. They cover things like food safety. So in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a lot of work has been done looking at how they will lower food safety regulations for imports and our ability to inspect new food comes in. They've lowered those regulations and made it more easy for countries and companies to challenge you at the border. If you say, the seafood, we have a problem with food safety at the seafood, now they can challenge that in a faster or more expeditious way. They cover regulations on consumer labeling. So many of you may have heard about country of origin labeling. That was a big fight here in several farm bills to get mandatory country of origin labeling for meat. That was struck down under trade rules at the WTO, the World Trade Organization. Canada, Mexico challenged our law, and now we don't have mandatory country of origin labeling for meat. To show you the power of these trade deals. The other area they touch on are government programs. Like what kind of spending can you do? So our farm bill is kind of convoluted and messed up, but a lot of it is them trying to jump through hoops to make sure that they're compliant with trade rules, or kind of how they work. But the other thing they do is they really frown upon what they call localization barriers to trade. So rules and government programs that give incentives for local businesses or local purchasing from farmers. So you see this a lot in renewable energy. There's been a number of programs that in different countries that have been struck down because they prioritize purchasing from local solar producers or something like that. We have a lot of these kind of programs in the United States, sort of green jobs oriented programs. I think it's probably a matter of time before some kind of food oriented case comes forward in trade, but that hasn't happened yet. The other area in trade that often comes up and is relevant here is environmental regulations. One of the things that the WTO did in '95 was allow countries to challenge other countries if they're breaking the rules. They have a very strict legal requirement. This isn't like UN deals where people sort of commit to do better things. If you look at the Paris Climate Agreement, for example, it's all a voluntary commitment and it's sort of a public shaming way of enforcement. These trade deals are legal documents where there is an actual legal proceeding that can be brought on enforcement. And the WTO, countries can bring cases against others and win, and if they win, you either got to change the law or you got to pay a lot of money. What NAFTA did, what the Trans-Pacific Partnership does, is allow corporations to also bring those cases. Corporations can sue governments if they feel like they've been treated unfairly. And so you see this in environmental regulations quite a bit. We've seen that TransCanada has challenged the Obama administration's decision to block the Keystone Pipeline. They're suing the U.S. for $15 billion under NAFTA. But other cases have involved fracking, have involved offshore drilling, mining, again, things around zoning, things that are very important to this CAFO fight as well. Well, my phone's going off for some reason. My daughter called me at a perfect time. And then, so TPP, really quickly. We have a chance to beat this trade agreement. This is an expansion of NAFTA. It is going from sort of 3 countries to 12. It's been called NAFTA on steroids. Our main concerns are, one, it expands the corporate rights and the ability of corporations to challenge laws. So countries that had previously not been part of free trade agreements, corporations in Australia, Vietnam, Japan, Malaysia, New Zealand, can now challenge U.S. laws that they feel like their investments in the U.S., they've somehow been treated unfairly, and new regulation is coming to place. We're concerned about food safety imports that I mentioned before and some of those regulations. We're concerned about the expansion of dairy imports. And this is another key thing, is that New Zealand, the biggest dairy exporter, is part of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And lastly, what TPP includes is a chapter for the first time ever in any trade agreement, a chapter on regulatory coherence. So what this means is that what they're trying to do is get the same regulations of all TPP countries. So this is a space where any new regulations, countries have to bring it to the chapter, to the Committee on Regulatory Coherence, and they can discuss it and say, is this really necessary? Do you really need this new regulation? Will it hinder trade? And so this is the theme that you see in all these trade agreements, is trade is above any other concern. So those are kind of the 4 key concerns that we have, but there are many more. We can beat this TPP. A very strong coalition has been opposing this. Both presidential candidates are opposing this. The Obama administration is going to try to sneak it through in the lame duck session. And the downside is every multinational corporation, every agribusiness company that we're talking about, every financial firm wants the TPP. But there is such political opposition to it. We have a chance to turn this back, and if we can, it will be really historic. It's a historic stand against corporate power, and we believe we can jump on that momentum and start looking at some of these past trade deals and what we have to do to reform them. So, thanks very much. I'm going to pass it on to Dan.
Good morning. It's great to be here. My name is Dan Imhoff, and I want to thank Kendra and the SRAP team. I am a board member of SRAP, and it's Sunday morning. I don't really go to church, but this kind of feels like the church of the fighting activists that I've gotten to know over the many years that I've followed these issues. And I think by extension, you are optimists, and there's probably no better topic for the angry optimist, the angry fighting optimist than the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is this huge US policy that in a large part really supports and drives this consolidation that Patty just talked about, that we saw on the bus yesterday. I'm a writer, so I like to prepare remarks. And words are very important. I have that exhibition of words over there on the sidewall around CAFOs. But a number of years ago, I was at a conference in Vancouver, and we were working on a declaration on the problems of industrial agriculture. And the great agrarian laureate, Wendell Berry, was in the room, and he was an editor on this declaration. And it was an extremely humbling experience because, we were huddled in the corner, like trying to write these fantastic statements, and Wendell would write next to them an ugly turn of phrase. And he was right. He was right. As we think about what we want to ask for, no matter how technical the subject might be, we have to find ways to speak about it that people can really understand. So let's just quickly talk about the Farm Bill. If the Farm Bill, it's $100 billion a year, and it's a bunch of titles that are basically spending categories. If the Farm Bill was a dollar bill, today about 70 cents would go to food stamps. About 20 cents would go to crop insurance and commodity supports for big farm operations. 6 cents would go to conservation if we're lucky. And that leaves 4 cents for a bunch of other really important categories like trade, credit, horticulture, organic agriculture, research, energy, rural development, forestry. So as we think about the acronyms and these titles and this wonky language that really governs the Farm Bill, I think it's really important to get down to the basics of what it is. It's $100 billion a year that we have. That's a great opportunity to spend on food and agriculture and to shape our world. And more importantly, to do things better, more fairly, to compensate for values and costs that the market does not recognize. 2019 is the next Farm Bill cycle, so we have a few years to get ready for it. And what are we trying to do? I think we're trying to protect the natural world while we farm, provide health and sustenance, especially to those most needy, create a culture that values farmers, workers, and vibrant rural communities, and lead the world by example and commitment to conservation and stewardship, research and innovation, fairness and health. I think it's really important. There was an initiative by the Land Institute in Kansas a number of years ago, and I was lucky to be part of these discussions that talked about, let's look at the Farm Bill as a 50-year goal. And so we have, every 5 years we have a new one. We can start to imagine the types of agriculture we want to have 50 years from now. And every 5 years we can see how we're doing and what we're investing in. And I think this is really important because about 50 years ago, it was when Earl Butz and the USDA really transformed the kind of agriculture that we have today. And we did it in very rapid fashion, as we heard on the bus yesterday. And it was incredible what we dismantled, how many farmers we lost because of the policies that got put in place. Mandatory set-asides were abandoned. Supply management mechanisms that guaranteed prices were slowly dismantled. The food stamp program became hitched to the Farm Bill. Conservation dollars started to become pilfered for infrastructure spending, and the biggest players and their beneficiaries began to write the rules of the economics of agriculture. So the first new idea is, if you're too big, get out. It's really time that we have very, very serious limits on income eligibility for crop insurance and price supports. And rather than these open checkbooks, that we have these huge firms that are eligible to get unlimited amounts of crop insurance and other financial mechanisms that make this whole work. And all the time, the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, where the Farm Bill came from, should never, ever be far from our minds. And what I mean by that, you know, the soil was literally blowing away over Washington, D.C. when the first soil erosion service was initiated. And so the government came in and they said, you know, we will help you out, we will subsidize you, but you're going to put in place conservation methods in return that are going to help raise prices, but they're going to help keep the soil on the ground from blowing away. So the second thing that we might ask for is no subsidization without social obligation. And that means we want to ask for a lot. Zero soil erosion, clean air and water that leave farms, biodiversity protection at the highest level. I think that Lynn Henning might say no subsidization with outstanding violations. If you're in violations of environmental regulations, why should we be giving you price support? So over these next 50 years, what I really see is that we need to incentivize the transition from a fossil fuel monoculture mind to an agroecological mind. And these future agriculture systems are going to be more locally adapted, more intelligent-based, rich in labor, skills, and knowledge of optimizing exchanges of energy and nutrients between domestic farming and the natural world. These so-called alternative agricultures of the present, diversified organic operations, grass-pastured, and humanely raised livestock operations will lead our food system. In 50 years, 2 generations of new farmers and 10 farm bills with consistent programs can expand these production methods and put us into a brand new territory of how we raise our food. Very quickly, our conservation incentives should be impressive and far-reaching. 10% of the land should always be in conservation reserve programs, with increasingly moves toward large, permanent, contiguous areas. We need a revolution in how we fertilize our crops, and a global revolution really in cover crop techniques that replace nitrogen fertilizers with biological methods. And we can do that through the Farm Bill by saying, first, 10% of our cropland is going to be in cover crops instead of the 2% today, and then 25, and then 50, and eventually 100%, and we begin to really clean up this nutrient problem that is so completely out of control and almost irreversible. Measurable gains in soil carbon and soil organic matter will be rewarded and give us a value to a truly non-renewable resource, the soil. USDA will shift its culture from feeding the world with industrial agriculture to leading the world with knowledge and practices that can be locally adapted in various places and adapted so that we can feed ourselves without destroying the planet. There'll be a labor title for the Farm Bill. There is no labor title to do anything for the 6 million farm workers in the country today. There'll be a transparency title, perhaps, to uphold labeling and production information systems so that consumers know about the true costs and realities of their production. An urban agriculture title could support the inner city food production movement. The livestock title will be renamed the animal husbandry title, and as it was once before, and focus once again on diverse breeds and complex issues of grazing, feeds, animal health, local processing, ensuring fair markets, and an end to packer monopolies. The current animal damage control that spends $100 million each year to trap poison and attempt to eradicate species such as coyotes, mountain lions, wolves, bears, red-winged blackbirds, will be replaced by a species restoration and predator coexistence program. Yesterday, I thought that we needed a title for citizen monitoring, because as we saw on the bus yesterday, we need armies of people protecting the essential interaction between farms and what we all need in common, which is clean water, and it obviously isn't being done to the level that it has to be done. And just for a cherry on top, our dietary and nutrition requirements will be supported by policies and programs that incentivize their production. That is, we will no longer be subsidizing junk food if we don't want it to be at the top of our food pyramid. How we talk about policy so that people get excited, as Wendell reminded me so many years ago, may be as important as what we're asking for. So let's think carefully about what we want and give them some poetry.
Those are some great thoughts to kick off this discussion here. We're going to be having time for questions hopefully at the end here. So my name is John Peck. I'm the Executive Director of Family Farm Defenders. And I grew up on a farm in central Minnesota during the farm crisis some of the other folks here talked about. In fact, my neighbor committed suicide at his kitchen table in the 1980s because they're being foreclosed at the time due to low commodity prices. So I'm definitely a product of farm struggle of this country. And I also happen to teach economics at Madison College when I'm not defending family farms. And I know some of you maybe think economics is a form of brain disease, like David Brower described it as. And I try to teach my students that there's actually better forms of economics. That's part of what we're talking about with what's fair trade versus free trade, what's real wealth versus money, things like that. And not only here, but in the classes I teach. So I was just going to share a few other thoughts and hopefully have some time for questions. So George Orwell, some of you might be familiar with him. He wrote a lot of interesting things. And one thing he did write in The Road to Wigan Pier, he talked about, we have statues for politicians and bishops, but we don't have statues for cooks or gardeners. And that's part of the problem in our society, is we don't value farming. We don't value food anymore. It's all become a commodity. Farmers have become throwaway people. Farm workers are throwaway people. If you look at our economic system, all the people that are paid the lowest in our economic system all work in food. From family farmers to food workers to migrant workers picking vegetables, all the way up to the person making lattes at the coffee shop or someone flipping burgers. And that is what's wrong. That's part of what's wrong with our food system. And people often ask me, what's the most important thing? Well, I say, well, we need food and water. And those are, we cannot have a society or civilization without those things. And we can live without Pokemon. We cannot live without food. And it's really important that we stop devalorizing and commodifying our food system. We heard from Patty a little bit about how the concentration of agriculture has been happening. And this goes way back. I mean, I'm often told, you can't use the term factory farm, John. That's a bad term. You people use that to make fun of us. I'm going, no, actually it comes from an economic textbook. I read 1890. Alfred Marshall wrote Principles of Economics, and in there he uses factory farm. First time it was ever used in a textbook. As a footnote, he's talking about efficiency, production. He's applying Taylorism. I know people are familiar with Winslow Taylor, right? Henry Ford was a big fan of his. Applying those principles to the farm, mechanization, turning cows into widgets, people into work, commodification, all that. And he was celebrating it. The idea of the factory farm back then. And we already had the swill dairies. Don't even get me talked about when factory farms started in this country. We've had them for a long time. The problem is that did not happen naturally. That was a conscious policy. Those things were promoted and subsidized. And I'll never forget, we had a Democratic governor here, James Doyle for a while, who passed our right to factory farm legislation, basically, in this state. Under his administration, you could get $1 million to buy cows and lock them up in a factory farm. From the state, $1 million grant. If you were a rotational grazer, you were lucky to get $5,000 for some fencing. You were lucky if you could get that. So I mean, that shows like there's been a conscious push. And Earl Butz, I grew up with him in my high school. I was an FFA. We heard that every day, get big or get out. when I was in high school, even being told that by my ag teachers. And that's the type of culture we need to get away from. And unfortunately, we heard with globalization, we are exporting this technology, this mindset to other countries. Right? We now have more prisoners than farmers in the United States. Right? We're down to less than 12,000 dairy farmers in Wisconsin. Same thing's happened in Japan. They're down to 18,000 dairy farms. They used to have over 400,000 in the 1960s. We're exporting this model around the world, right through USAID, World Bank, and I'll admit I've worked for the World Bank. You want to talk to me later? I'll talk to you about the World Bank. Meet me later. So the problem is we're replicating this model elsewhere. It becomes even worse, right? People know they're trying to build the largest factory dairy farm in the world right now in China. 100,000 cows. The market is going to be Russia. Do you think U.S. corporations are helping to do that? I'm sure they are, right? That's part of their whole model, right? So we have this, factory farm model that's been pushed by our government, by industry, and so on. And then we have the whole trade issue, right? So we talked about trade. Who benefits from trade? Do farmers export? Any exporting farmers in this room? Corporations export. They buy your raw commodities and export it. They make money doing it. In fact, they can export and re-import it. Right? They export cheese and re-import it back into the U.S. Get paid both times to do it. Right? So we have that problem with trade issues too. Where, who benefits from trade? Are there examples of forced trade? I'm here because of forced trade. My ancestors had to flee Ireland due to a potato famine that was artificially orchestrated. They were exporting food from a starving country because there were contracts that had to be filled. They had soldiers at the docks as the food left. And my ancestors had to sign an indentured servitude agreement, undocumented immigrants coming to the U.S., right? Fleeing starvation. There's an example of forced trade. I can think of lots of others. Slavery. So if you have trade deals that are not free, people didn't democratically agree to them. We have a picture of Brunei up here. Anyone know about Brunei? What type of country that is? Is it a democracy? No, it's not a democracy. Vietnam? Good question. And those are going to be part of our trade deals, our trade partners. Does trade make people better friends? Is China our best friend? Who's our largest trading partner? Do they own us? These are good questions. So we need to find a better way. And, Patty mentioned, the whole concentration system is just not, it's not sustainable, it's not viable. Anybody remember melamine? I'll just mention some of the problems with trade. Anyone remember melamine? Killed 10,000 dogs and cats in the United States. Killed a whole bunch of babies in China. Right? Infant formula contaminated. That's the type of stuff we'll get with trade. I can tell you more. Canada will be forced to import RBGH-induced milk under TPP. They'll be forced to, whether they want to or not. They will have to start accepting our bovine growth hormone milk. And then land grabbing. Don't even get me started about there. Anybody want to know about global trade in land? That's the latest frontier. There's corporations now gobbling up farmland all around the world, just for investment speculation purposes. They're not going to be growing food necessarily on it. They're doing it for carbon credits. They're doing it for other things. And I was in Copenhagen when Vilsack hatched his deal to build manure digesters on U.S. farms, factory farms, as a way to meet our carbon credit obligations under the climate change negotiation. That was horrible. Is subsidizing factory farms in the U.S. so we can get around our climate change obligations. No grass-fed operation they're getting carbon credits for doing what they do. So, I don't want to, be the Debbie Downer here. So I wanted to give you, I liked last night, Gordon's, and we had a little bit of a wish list from, things we want to see, right? My students always ask me, John, that's so depressing. What's your vision of a positive world? Well, I have lots of great visions of a positive world. So what's on my wish? We already heard, kill the TPP. No more trade deals. We want a fair trade policy, not a free trade policy. That's like bottom line for me. It's really bottom line for me. And so I include things like we already heard about country of origin labeling. Why don't we have country of origin labeling? I should be able to pick up any package and find out where it's from. That's like common sense. I teach them in my econ class, page 5, consumer right to know. It can't make a rational choice without information. You know, living wages, union rights, defending the commons. Anyone here think water is a common public good?
Yeah.
I do. I do. So why should we be sacrificing, we heard this last night, why should we be sacrificing water, land, air, biodiversity to corporate profit? We need to defend the commons. Corporations are not people. Excuse me. Corporations are not people. They should not have legal standing before the WTO, and I don't. So we need to change that. We do not have standing. And we heard, last night, part of the problem in the United States is we don't have local control anymore. We need to re-democratize our own country. State laws, federal laws, World Trade Organization rules that preempt our power to make decisions at the local level are just illegitimate. We need to draw a line in the sand. No more of that. Anyone here remember the precautionary principle? Oh my gosh, I learned this in science way back in high school. You do not tinker with something if you don't know what the results are. So why do we not apply the precautionary principle to every new technology that comes down the pipeline? Does anyone here want nanotech on their muffin? And that little nice white frosting, it's so white, thanks to titanium dioxide. Don't worry, it's safe. Because everything's safe. No, I don't believe it. So, I mean, we should be doing a precautionary principle for every technology, every new thing that comes down the road. And if you're going to sell it, aren't you liable for it? What about liability for some of this stuff, too? What about recalling things that are defective? The government can recall a defective ladder, why can't they recall contaminated meat? That just makes total sense. Reclaiming our land-grant college system. This is one of my favorite pet peeves. I went to UW-Madison. I went to the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. What happened to our land-grant colleges? Since when did they become for-hire corporate mercenaries? They're supposed to be doing public research in the public interest, not what Monsanto tells them to do. I should not be getting hauled before the dean of the Ag School and yelled at for criticizing bovine growth hormone research on my campus with taxpayer dollars. I don't approve of that. And so we need to because this is going to be part of the whole idea of reclaiming agriculture from agribusiness. We need to redirect our public funding, our public energies, our laws towards that new food system we want to create. And I would just conclude, because we want to have some time for questions here, think of food sovereignty as a broader concept, right? This is a concept that came from the Global South. Via Campesina came up with this term as a response to globalization and the World Trade Organization and so on. And the way I describe it for a U.S. audience, it's like, how do we re-democratize our food system? You can apply it to energy and other things too. It's sovereignty. And we're in Oneida land here. I don't have to explain this to indigenous people. They understand the concept of sovereignty. But many of the rest of us have somehow lost that over time. We need to reclaim the idea of sovereignty. We have the right to say and have meaning in our own lives. It should be dictated by others. And so I hope that people would think about that some. And I don't know how many people remember Elinor Ostrom. She won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2009, the first woman ever to win the prize, one of my heroines, economics. And she writes all about how the commons and cooperation are much better than private property and competition. And that's why she won the Nobel Prize. And just think about that in your own communities. What represents a healthy economy for you? Is it working together, liking your neighbors, caring about the land and the water around you, feeling good when you sit down to a meal with others? Or is it all about how many widgets can it crank out fast enough to get some more money to put in a bank somewhere? That is not a healthy economy. That's not what a healthy community is about. And I guess I'll leave it there and we'll have some discussion. Thanks.
it was a big hue and cry over that, and especially with small communities were asked to do that. But as far as I know, we've done that now. And I don't know of any community that's suffering financially because they've done that. So what would it take to have people who have large farms be required to process their waste as we process human waste? Wouldn't that solve a lot of problems? It's not that hard to do. These processing waste treatment plants, you're adding some tankage, you're adding some vegetation, you're adding some other ancillary processing. It's not that expensive. All these rich farmers who own these big farms, I'm sure, can afford to do it.
The first thing it would take is political will that is currently absent, really at every level, right? I see a lot of shaking it. So from local to state to federal, we have not had an EPA in a long time. I think the rest of the day there's lots of people who can talk about it ever, who've been willing to apply the laws we use to say, we have waste treatment for cities. They haven't been willing to hold parts of agriculture, especially animal agriculture, to that standard. Then there is a whole other conversation about, do you treat this problem, or do we talk about not having so many animals in one place that we need to treat it in that way, right? Which is a bigger picture discussion. But everybody in this room has had a battle with their state environmental agency about what is the permitting or not having to permit. What are these agencies doing? And they're doing that under the supervision of the EPA, who has not been willing to stand up to these meat, dairy, egg companies that are running this show. So I think that's a short answer. There's a much more technical, legal answer that I think some of the afternoon sessions especially are going to talk about. But then we have this system idea of why do we have a system that's creating waste in that way when we used to, and we could again, have people raising animals in a way that isn't creating this waste burden that we have to find treatment. So there's two things.
Yeah, I guess I was dealing with the problem right now, but I have this debate with the Farm Bureau all the time. I like to have more farmers, not fewer. I want them to be smaller scale and more sustainable and scattered around. And when I was growing up, my neighbors would tell me, if your manure's a problem, you're too big for your britches. There's something wrong with your farm if you can't actually use the waste responsibly in your own farm. We have factory farms in Wisconsin here with thousands of cows on 40 acres. There's no way they're going to take half the county to spread this manure around. That's just not sustainable. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a scale problem. And I can tell you all about other scale problems. It's just too big, chaos. I mean, I've taken a whole class that you did on chaos theory in agriculture. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's a disaster waiting to happen.
I'm Brett Wills. I'm an Iowa farmer. You said quite a bit about Iowa there, problems in Iowa, Patty. Dan, you talked a lot about spending and you gave explaining this as a spending paradigm. And by the way, I'm also then tabling out here, and it's really not spending, is it? It's a market management paradigm that's needed. And that you've presented it as a spending paradigm. Most of the people come here and they already think that it's about spending and subsidies. If you put the two of you together, then you'd say Iowa has problems because it's been over-rewarded. I've been tabling this morning, and that's what a lot of people are saying. Yeah, they think Iowa's been over-rewarded, these states, and that's what's helping CAFOs. But really, CAFOs are helped by being paid by Iowa farmers and other farmers through cheap prices, and those are not caused at all. There's no evidence that cheap prices are caused by subsidies. Some of you may know that, or maybe you don't. I don't know. If you have any evidence that you think that subsidies cause cheap prices, then I would like to hear what it is. But then finally, you're supposedly given a talk about the Farm Bill here, and you have not said that there's any proposal that we can support that will make CAFOs pay a fair price. Historically, this is, in my analysis, a $4 trillion issue since the 1950s, when it really started. Not Bucks didn't do anything. It was in the 50s, and lowering the price bar. So you haven't mentioned any prop policy. Do you know whether or not there are any policies that we could support in our organizations that would make CAFOs pay a fair price? Because I do. And one of it is the National Family Farm Coalition's Food for Family Farmers Act, and one of it is the NFU's market-driven inventory system, and you haven't mentioned either one. If I go to your sites and read your papers, will they mention NFFC's proposal? Will they mention NFU's proposal? Because these people think that it's the subsidies that are causing the tables to get subsidized, and so they're saying, erase the subsidies. But you know, that's a massive subsidy to K folks that people are doing. Our movement is divided. How come this isn't being discussed?
Well, thank you for the comments. I think it is being discussed. Well, you just brought it up, and thank you for doing it. You won't find those policies probably in my book, Food Fight. I tend to see the subsidies really as a financial mechanism, and oftentimes our farm communities are passing money through. I think that the crop insurance has just kind of taken place of the commodity programs, and it is a way for very, very large financing operations to make sure they're going to get paid at the end of the season. And you know, as I've seen the analysis, really, feed is a very important #1 cost component of factory farming. And when we've had dozens and dozens of years of these crop programs that often distort the price of corn, which is a huge input into the system. The farm commodity programs. Yes, yes. I do.
I mean, this is about a 3-day conversation we just did in 40 minutes on Sunday morning, and this is what happens, right? So Kendra's telling me we got to move on to the next panel, but let me throw this out there. There is a lot of ways to look at this. And this is what happens in the farm bill discussion. We should be having this discussion. We agree with you. We've supported the National Food for Family Farms Act, the MINUS proposal. We're entering the next farm bill cycle. We're going to be talking about them again. And what this boils down to, I think, for folks who maybe have not had the particular delight living through this farm bill process, is talking about who benefits. And it is very easy to get that wrong. And I think that's what you're bringing up, Brad. And when I make that picture of the hourglass, the money is getting stuck in the middle, right? So the money we spend on food doesn't make it back to the farm, and it doesn't make it back to the farm because folks buying grains, buying animals, buying milk don't have to necessarily pay farmers the cost of production, because we have a farm bill that gives them some money after the fact so they don't go out of business at the same time. No, I'm not saying it does. I'm saying it prevents the collapse. We're actually talking about the same thing. We've been doing this for a while. We're happy to talk about it more. But what we are careful to do, and what I think everybody needs to get better at talking about, is that the beneficiaries are those buyers, right? And in fact, are actually laundering a lot of taxpayer dollars through farmers. And this is how we talk about it. I think a lot of us are actually talking about the same thing. So this is why we all have to have this conversation as we go into another farm bill cycle, so that they can't pull us apart in this way, because we agree with you, we're supporting the same thing, so I have to explain it maybe in a different way when I'm talking to consumers. So I think we are now into the next panel's time. So we're happy to talk about it more, and then lots of folks here have tables and materials on it. You can check out more of Brad's table too, and this is what we have to be doing in the next year as we move into these policy fights.